Welcome to the latest episode of the Auto Futurecast with me, Chris Kirby, in association with Tomorrow's Journey and Asset Finance Connect. Today we're joined by Erwin Bakker from Jaguar Land Rover. Jaguar Land Rover Financial Services. I'm going to ask you to give the bit of the structure and where your business fits in a second, but welcome, thanks for joining us. I guess just starting with that, Owen, tell us a little bit about, people don't need to know about Jaguar Land Rover. If there's any of our listeners who have never heard of Jaguar Land Rover, I'd be very surprised. But actually just, you're in the global financial services business, but tell us a little bit about the kind of where that fits into the overall organisation and kind of what you guys get up to.
Yeah, sure, no problem. And thanks for having me today, to be honest. The global financial service team looks after all of the partnerships that JLR does to deliver financial services to both our clients and our retailers. Yeah. Of course, unlike most of our OEM competitors, we don't have our own captive finance house. We very much work through partnerships with best-in-class lenders in the UK, across Europe, across the US, and across all of our global territories, where we've got a national sales company.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. Brilliant. And that's something that is, I guess, takes up quite a lot of your time. There's a little bit about, I guess, managing those vendors and other things, but kind of in your role, in your kind of transformation strategy role, I guess you're looking a bit beyond that as well. So what kind of things are on your agenda at the moment? What kind of things you're looking at?
Yeah, so of course the key is for us to deliver a client proposition through our finance providers that enables our clients to, of course, purchase vehicles. And of course, very much the lifeblood of any OEM is the liquidity that comes in through the wholesale channel. So of course, we need to make sure that we maintain our wholesale limits through our retailer or for our retailers and in the market. That's great today. We all know that we're living in a world that's changing rapidly with EVs, with different client needs, with changing technologies. So my role within JLR is very much to look at, well, what's next for those partnerships? Do we need to change the business model today through a white label? In future, is there something that we need to change in that model where maybe there is more risk sharing, or how do we challenge our existing partners to really be innovative and to go with the market and ideally lead the market in finding new ways of engaging with our clients?
Yeah, interesting. And I guess it's kind of that interesting hybrid, really, where often the captive operates sort of separately to the kind of main car business as I always call it little brother. You know, and I've worked for a few, so I think I'm allowed to say that. It's always like the little brother big brother kind of relationship, and there's always a balance there. But I guess with you guys, you're more embedded, and then you have your partners, so you've got a bit more of an opportunity to sort of drive the strategy top down, which I think provides a real opportunity for you guys, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, in my prior life, I used to work for what now is Vauxhall Finance, also in a European-wide role, and of course, you're very much working with the GM team, but it's a separate company, separate KPIs. Whereas, of course, our team, we're fully embedded within the commercial operation of JLR. We work very closely with the NSEs, and of course, we then translate what their needs are into our requirements for our partners. It gives us a level of agility that I think some OEMs would love to have, where the captive might not be quite on the right track. We can either ask our existing partners to develop new products, or we go to tender, we find new partners, and we build effectively an ecosystem around our clients that allows us to, for them to at least enjoy the vehicle.
Yeah, definitely. And it's such a fundamental part. And I think when we talk about our audience, I think a lot of our audience is sort of familiar with the inner workings of a car company and the kind of layers to it. But I always explain to my friends when they say, oh, yeah, well, I've got my car on finance from JLR. Well, you actually haven't. You bought the car from a dealer and you financed it with a separate company, and actually JLR didn't do anything with the vehicle after it left the factory because it went onto a wholesale stocking line and all of that stuff. So the role of financial services really kicks in from that first stage, which is why I think when we're going to talk a bit about the kind of business models and innovation within that space, it's so hard for the traditional OEM to do anything about business models because they don't control today's business model. They're a wholesaling business.
Yes.
They ship the car from the factory and they wholesale it, and they do have some control over sales and marketing. But.
Yeah, and of course we try to make sure that we optimize that wholesale point because, as I say, an OEM liquidity comes from the point of wholesale, not not the point of retail. But at the same time, like all of our captive competitors, we would like to engage with our clients throughout the lifetime of that contract. We want to, of course, optimize the loyalty of that client at the end of the contract so that he can renew and go into his next JLR vehicle. So we effectively work with best-in-class partners to make sure that we therefore end up with best-in-class retention and renewal rates. And we really are a way of our retailers selling more cars more often.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the way of kind of the very first iteration of maybe the last iteration of the old model or the first iteration of the new one, I'm not sure which, but that idea of retention and kind of customer life cycle management, which is a thing that I know you guys are heavily involved in. Rolling back 10 years when I was working with JLR and JLR Financial Services, that was a thing that we were sort of pioneering, I think, at that stage, and it's become really the kind of mainstay of the industry, and that idea of cycling a customer through. But that still is very much kind of transactional, or I see it as being transactional, that somebody buys a car, you sort of try and manage a bit of a relationship with them through the life, and then you get to what is like a renewal point and try and transact with them again. But this kind of idea, I guess, more as a vehicle as a service, or more flexible based models, clearly something that we're interested in and close to our heart. But how do you guys see that as a within the sort of JLR ecosystem?
So at the moment we're very much looking at what's that next way that our clients want to consume our vehicles. We of course have got through InMotion Ventures, we've got two I guess early stage businesses in Pivotal and the Out, really exploring how subscription works in for our clients and how we can drive a more usage-based proposition. And of course, in the Out, we've got a premium rental company, which again, rental is a well-served market. You've got the usual suspects, but actually what we're finding is that people would like a far more premium service, and people are willing to pay for that service.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's there's the different customer types, I think, for the different products. I think definitely within Pivotal, there's definitely a market for, I guess, your kind of higher earners, but who want a flexible and product they change more regularly. I think the crossover with the rental product as well, which is almost the opposite, the non-car owners or the city dwellers who then are having vehicles, and the combination of those things. So it feels like it's the very early stage, or sort of the first stage of the new kind of iteration, or the new way that things are building. Do you see that something? I know that's relatively active here in the UK. Is it something that's happening in other markets as well within your kind of organisation?
So of course the team are looking at whether some of those products are interesting for other markets. So of course we have trialed a subscription product in Germany in the past with our existing partner there, and we find that there is appetite. It's of course, how do you make the economics work for a subscription product to be long-term sustainable? I guess the challenge everybody has in automotive, and coming back to the vehicle as a service proposition, there is that real annoying thing that clients look at the age of the vehicle through the license plate, and the use of the vehicle through the mileage. And of course, that leads to quite significant depreciation in those first 1 or 2 years of the vehicle's life cycle. And the vehicle might last 20 years, but in the first 2 years, it loses the vast majority of its value. To therefore put in the market a competitive and attractive subscription proposition becomes relatively challenging. So of course, what we're very much looking at is how can we change the perception of a car, and how can we effectively have clients not just judge it based on those two factors, but actually judge it based on what it is, which is a really good service in a car that will likely feel like new, will likely look like new, because it has the latest updates. It's been refurbished to a good degree, beyond where, say, approved standards are today. And hopefully by being able to drive I guess a higher price point for second, third, fourth use, actually we can improve the proposition around subscription and make that a far more attractive business model for OEMs.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the vehicles have to make anything work in in a flexible proposition, and I could call it kind of flexible subscriptions. That has a somewhat of a bad reputation of the tried and failed products out there. I still think that none of those even reach version 1 of subscription really in their product life cycle. But I think that the idea of being able to use a vehicle more through its life and actually for longer periods is a must. I was thinking with the Volvo product, I've talked about it before in various settings, that I was a customer of Volvo subscription, particularly like coming out of lockdown. Actually, my previous car was on a PCP. It went back to the finance company, and I was in a point where I was like, I actually don't really know what I'm going to do, where I'm going to be living. I was selling my flat and other things. Ended up keeping it for about 18 months, but then I had a brief hiatus with a different vehicle, and then I was looking to do something else, and I thought, maybe I'll just take one for 3 months. What I worked out was Volvo, whether I took it for 18 months or 3 months, at the end of it they were always going to sell it.
Yeah.
And I was like, on the 18-month one, when they'd been charging me 700 quid a month for my XC60, they probably made some money on that,
yeah.
particularly coming out of lockdown. But on the second one, there's no way they'd have made money on it, because I only was going to keep it for 3 months. I actually did something else in the end. But it's that kind of slightly strange thing. I don't know why that wasn't cycled through more, because
I know. And of course, with our pivotal proposition, it's never about having a new car. Some clients will have a new car at some point in time, but it's always about having a fresh vehicle.
Yes, yeah.
So it won't have 80,000 miles on the clock, but of course it may have been used by somebody previously. Now, again, just the fact that a car has been used before doesn't mean it's now less valuable.
Yeah.
I kind of try to compare it with other services that we consume. We go on a bus, and the bus might be 2 days old or 20 years old. We pay the same fare. We go on an airplane. Your ticket's no more or no less based on the age of the plane or the miles that it's flown. You pay the same price for that service. And of course, if we look at the success of Pivotal, is that people really value the service that it delivers. It's very much, they call it high tech, high touch. It's very personalized, and people are staying with those vehicles far longer and with that service far longer than I think we all expected at the beginning. Yeah. Because feedback is really good and pretty amazing. Yeah, and I think definitely, and I think for having the right product for the right audience is key. I think maybe this is a debut for this podcast, but it's an analogy I use all the time for subscription. Is subscription being like burgers, that you can have a McDonald's fast food burger and you can have a gourmet burger that you pay 20 quid for in a fancy pub. They're still a burger, yes, but one costs £3.50 and one costs 20 quid, and one is the same anywhere in the world, and it's just fast and it's you know what you're getting, and another one's wrapped in a experience that is in a nice location and with a view and with some special beer from a thing or whatever. That they're called the same thing, but they're different, and those two things are for different audiences, for different times in people's day, week, life. Yeah. And subscription will be the same thing. The Pivotal product is a product that is for an audience, and they've got that high touch service. There will be a market for people who aren't worried about the car being shiny new. I had before my wife got her latest car, we had a vehicle. It was a 3-year-old Kia Niro with 70,000 miles on it, and it was full of scratches and dents because it had been out on like business rental basically, but it was fine because I just wanted a cheap car while I was waiting for this other one to be delivered. So you can have different products for those different markets. But I also definitely think the same thing about customers keeping vehicles longer as well is a key thing that we're seeing as well. Unless you're targeting something I'm targeting a customer who wants short term, as in they're filling a gap or they don't want to make that commitment. Most customers want to keep their car beyond a year. Yes. Yeah, and on average, customers will stay with a vehicle for longer than we anticipated, even though you can effectively trade out after 3 months. Yeah, that doesn't happen very often. But it's interesting, of course, as a longer term view on how client expectations and demands are changing. Of course, if we then look at BEV, where there's still a lot of hesitation in the market for clients to actually own battery electric vehicles. Of course, in that market, we don't necessarily see a lot more subscription. Well, we used to. Yeah. Unfortunately, of course, with the decline in RVs, that wasn't sustainable for some. Yeah. But actually, in that market, of course, 90% of all of the vehicles that go out of the showroom are lease. Yeah. because of course clients want to no longer have a desire to own that vehicle at the end because they don't know where the battery technology will be.
Yep.
They don't really understand how the usage will affect the battery health. So actually, I think subscription as a model has legs. I think even more so, and a whole market move towards leasing, I think is probably even more likely. With subscription being sort of a for those who really want ultimate flexibility and ultimate service.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you're absolutely right. I think the transition in those business models for a genuine consumer, someone who was having a PCP, having a 3 or 4 year PCP 2 cars ago, now might look at now is probably taking a lease, probably on a BEV on salary sacrifice, but generally if we took outside of the UK, generally starting to take a lease. There's a transition, and you've got kind of subscription, which is a super flexible, high touch product over here. I think they'll merge together, and you'll kind of have this sort of flexible lease. It's got some flexibility, but you're still making a longish term commitment, because I think that's what customers want. I think I said to you when we did the pre-call for this, I've actually got the service reminder for my car that's on a 2-year lease. I love it. I was like, oh God, I'm in 6 months I'm going to have to think about getting a new one. I really like it. I'm already thinking of calling the company and saying, can I extend my lease? Because and that's coming from someone who had 20 years of having a new car every 3 months working for an OEM. So I'm in that like change cycle, but I'm going, I don't really want to change my car. So I think, but you will have people who want the flexibility because they need it and they can pay a premium for that, I guess. So.
Yeah, and it's beyond the flexibility, of course. It's the service that you deliver you receive when something goes wrong with the car, or if you've got questions about the payment, or if you've got questions about the use of the vehicle. Our cars, most Land Rovers or Range Rovers, Discoveries, Defenders, they're fairly complicated pieces of machinery. So if you actually want to understand the features, well, it'd be nice to have a concierge who can explain to you exactly what it is you're subscribing to. But I think, and I guess looking at business models for an OEM, that's quite a big transition. Because if I look at basic accounting, the reason why we can recognize revenue at the point of wholesale is because we pass on risk, we pass on control, and then we leave it to the retailers, who in our case largely are doing an amazing job at getting clients into our vehicles and selling them. However, we would like to, I guess, ideally have a longer term relationship with those clients, and we want not just the first client to have an amazing experience. We would like to get to a point where maybe the second, third, fourth client also has a similar experience. Not necessarily the same price point, because of course people still aspire to own a Range Rover, but not everybody can afford a new one. Yeah,
absolutely. And I definitely think that experience is also such a key factor, and I think people will be willing to pay for that, and some won't, and some in exactly the same way as, like, if you're flying to Mallorca on holiday, you can fly business class with BA, which is basically just a bigger seat on the, or you can fly Ryanair, and that you have that choice, and there's a price element to it, and you can decide that you want to fly from Stansted at 6 a.m. and be told that your bag's too big for the overhead locker, or you get. Actually, I'm going to say BA is a first class. It should be first class experience, but you can decide how you pay for that, and I think that will be the same with flexibility. It'll be the same with service. They're all things. And back to my burger analogy, you can choose if you want your gourmet burger in a place overlooking a lake, or if you want a McDonald's. People are going to want different things, and you can have a look at it. But I do think it's where OEMs will create their point of difference going forward, which I think is why it's really interesting for a brand like Jaguar and Land Rover. Yeah,
and of course, and we do that already. So of course, we've got Land Rover experience centres all over the world now. And that comes with the car. Most of our clients will receive that experience, because of course, well, you buy a Defender, well, you don't probably want to take your own Defender into a 70 or 90 millimeter ditch filled with water and mud and everything else. But if you could get the opportunity to have the experience, you probably would quite like to do that. I took some a partner out through the experience centre at Solihull the other week, and they absolutely loved it. Because what's there not to like about taking a car and being at a 20-degree angle and taking a tipping bridge, or driving through 90 mils of water is a pretty cool thing to do.
Definitely.
So of course for us it moves beyond just the purchase of a vehicle. It's about the experience you have with that vehicle or with related services that we can offer and wrap around it.
Definitely. And I think we've touched a little bit on it already, but the kind of move to BEV is also going to shape up some of this. If we think about vehicle lifetime, I actually saw a stat yesterday. So interesting, on a previous podcast, I interviewed Toby Poston, who's the head of behaviour LA, and he was saying that one of the big things that this was 2 years ago, he was saying they were worried about, BEVs are supposed to be cheaper to maintain, but at the time there wasn't really any evidence to support that, and tyres were more expensive and these things. But I actually read a stat yesterday of saying that the service cost in the first 3 years of a BEV is now 35-40% lower. So those operating costs, but also we know that they're lasting longer as well. This battery degradation fear that everybody has doesn't appear to be realised, and so then we could have a situation where a vehicle in our multiple life cycle world that we're talking about could be in its 7th, 8th year electric Range Rover and still be in good condition. And I don't know if that's a thing that you guys are seeing, or if you've seen the evidence of that.
Yeah, so of course we a while ago had a partnership, or got a partnership with Waymo in the US. So of course there's a lot of Jaguar I-Pacers driving around San Francisco. We've had some amazing results with some of the batteries. 300,000 miles, 92-93% battery health at that level. And that's, of course, because they're charged in the right way, they're used in the right way. And as a result, they last a lot longer than any, ICE powertrain would last, or at least even if the vehicle lasts that long, it would likely require a lot more maintenance. There's a lot more moving parts, a lot more complicated. So that's a real success story, really. But again, that therefore requires clients to, I think, look at the vehicle in a different light. It's not that just because it's a 62 plate, you're going to have a lot of problems with that vehicle. It's a 62 plate with 95% battery health. It will need the occasional service, but it probably needs some tyre replacements, but it won't need the amount of work that a vehicle of that age would otherwise have. So I think that we'll see a real shift in perception and people maybe being more comfortable with investing in a slightly older vehicle than what they have today, which again creates a challenge for the OEM and for the retailers, of course.
It does. There's always that. I forget when I'm talking to an OEM today, because there's a world where there potentially is less being produced in the much longer term, of course, but you get that customer lifetime value is higher. And I think if the customer perception was able to adjust, and I definitely think with BEVs coming in, people are definitely thinking more about sort of vehicles as being tools rather than things that they kind of want to own and have hold of, and it just becomes a lot easier if it's part of a service. They say you get a 62 plate with 80,000 miles on it, but it's just had a major overhaul, as I call it in aeroplane terminology, but it's just had a refurbish, it's got brand new tire, and if something goes wrong with it, the subscription company will just swap it for another one. It's not even like you've got to go through the hassle of it. There's something come wrong with it.
But again, that's the benefit, of course, of a lease or a subscription based product, is that you don't take any risk. If anything goes wrong during the life cycle of that car, whilst you have it, have the use of it, you'll get a new vehicle immediately, and you're back on the road. So, and you probably won't even see your old car back, because of course it's just a fresh vehicle every time. And if there is an issue with the car, we'll just swap it out for a new one that's been put back in the right condition.
And it's the right sort of it's the right vehicle that's fits the subscription that you're buying. So if I'm buying the bronze subscription, which gets me a car that's between X battery health and Y battery health and X condition, I just get one from the same pool. And if you're a gold thing, you might get a new one, or one that's less than a year old or something like that. So
and I think that will be interesting. And I think as well, and of course some OEMs have tried features over the air, and we know all about software over the air at the moment. And I think, of course, that again creates lots of opportunities in that second and third life or use phase, because, of course, why would you, as a used car buyer, you're currently very much reliant on what's available in the retailer. But actually, if with software-enabled features or software updates, actually the car that you pick up at the showroom might have features already inbuilt that you pay for to then have access to. So you could have a heated or a massage seat, which the first user didn't want.
Yeah.
But actually, as an OEM, we know that at some point in their life, there's a likelihood that somebody would like to have a massage seat.
Yeah.
So why not build it, have 400,000 odd standardized seats within each vehicle, and then turn on those features later because somebody's willing to subscribe to it.
Yeah.
So I think, again, it's a gradual transition from just thinking about the initial transaction and looking at how can we actually monetize, or this is a bit of I find it being a negative word, monetizing customers. But it's giving clients what they want when they want it.
Yeah.
And if you and against the budget that they have in order to gain access to a service that might otherwise be out of reach.
Yeah.
Because a new Range Rover, and I love them, but I couldn't afford to have one. But actually, if I can have a 5 or 6 year old one, I can to some extent personalize the vehicle by features or by applying certain upgrades. I might want one at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to maybe pay a premium for that Range Rover over an equivalent or even a slightly newer competitor's vehicle.
Yeah, and it allows you to pay for the things that you're using and not the others, I guess. And as long as from the manufacturing point of view that you've got your base cost or the cost to build, and then you're kind of adding these services in. I think it makes a lot of sense. I know there was a lot of backlash when a few of the German OEMs did it, say with the heated seats. And I think if you're buying a car, even if you're financing it, but if you're kind of financing it to own it, but then you're saying, oh, you can only have this thing that's in the thing that I'm buying if you pay me extra money, feels like monetizing.
Yes.
But if you're buying something in a subscription and you go, okay, right, well, now I just want to pay for this feature to be enabled.
Yes.
Or which features do I want? It's a checklist. You go, right, the car is £500 a month, including your insurance and maintenance and everything on a flexible package, and it's £3 a month for heated seats, and it's X pounds a month for the inbuilt sat nav rather than CarPlay, and et cetera, et cetera. It feels like a bit more of a Netflix type arrangement, which does sort of make a lot of sense.
And of course, for Netflix, you pay more for the extra screens.
You're
happy to if you're happy to have occasionally the message to say that your kids are using both of the both Netflix screens, then you just have to wait, or you shout at the stairs you tell one of them to go to bed.
Yeah.
But it is giving I guess clients the choice, and giving them the opportunity to tailor what they're actually paying for. Yeah. And they're paying for the use of something that actually they have a desire to own or to have at that moment in time.
Yeah.
Which again, it's an interesting concept. I guess the jury's out on whether the current generation of car buyers will go for it. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of indicators are that future car buyers, and the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas, will ownership for them is not necessarily the route that they want to pursue. So it's quite interesting how that will evolve. Yeah. It's even more interesting, of course, is that for an OEM, it's almost like we don't really have a choice, because of course with legislation coming in, especially in the EU, around our obligations to be able to recycle batteries at the end of life. Yeah. Well, if we have to stay involved with the vehicle for 20 years, well, why don't we do it properly? Why don't we evolve the business model? We work with our retailer networks to really think different about how clients have access to our vehicles, and how we continually deliver a service, again, that everybody values at different stages in that vehicle's life. And when it's no longer economically viable as a vehicle, it's a massive battery pack that's either has value as for the raw materials that it contains, or of course what we're already trialing today is to see whether we can put those out as battery storage units. Yeah. So I think last year we presented a pilot project which effectively used a number of PHEV batteries and put those in a battery storage unit, and we were kind of looking at how can we expand that, because it's a waste. Because if a battery is 70% state of health, yes, it might not give you the mileage you would want as a vehicle, because you don't want to charge it that often, but as a storage unit, it still has 65 kilowatts worth of storage capacity.
Yeah.
per battery.
You don't want to carry it around
in
a car. You don't want to carry the weight of it around in a car to not have the use of it. But if it's sitting in a field, just load balancing a solar array or something, then doesn't really matter. It doesn't need to be as dense. If in that sense, it's just about the sort of space it takes up, which is a lot easier.
Yeah, and of course, and then it's actually reusing a really valuable resource. And on the basis that as an OEM, we've got our objectives to be net zero at some point. I think 2035 is the target today. Actually reusing these batteries to help balance the grid and to provide that backup for when solar is gone or in the evenings, or it's there's not quite as much wind, then having a lot of those battery storage units and recycling the batteries that have been previously used is a much better use of our resources than putting virgin batteries into storage. So and we see quite a lot of startups in that space, and we've got quite a few interested parties who would like to work with us, and they are already working with us on see how we can exploit that.
Yeah, like a lot of these things, it's a piecing it all together, isn't it, in the real world? And I think I'm just going to come back to that in a second. I just want to drop back one place, just thinking about the type of people who would be interested. We're talking about the more optional service, and I think there was a reason why I wanted to just dwell on it for a second. Is I think often with our listeners are a lot of automotive people like you and I, who have been around a while, and you get a lot of kind of naysayers of going, "Why? No, I want that. I don't. We want that service. Why would I want?" The same thing when we talk about car sharing and things like that. I wouldn't want to share my car. But it's not aimed at you. Think about your kids, and that's the thing. Is like whenever we're thinking about those things, it's the next generation of the buyer, the current generation, maybe not the current generation of Jaguar Land Rover product buyers, the people that are currently buying their Vauxhall Corsas and in 5 to 10 years time are going to start to transition into more premium products, and then also the generation of teenagers now who are going to start looking at these things and think about what they want. I think you and I are kind of convinced of that, but I think any of the naysayers is worth considering. It's not aimed at you, it's aimed at your kids.
And it's also what you're saying no to.
Yeah.
Because for anybody to, as an OEM, yes, we sell the new car, and yes, we generate the revenue to pay the parts suppliers. But actually, if we stay involved with our cars for 5, 10, 15 years, well, we then supply the parts.
Yeah.
We also at some point will embed payment methods within those vehicles. We then collect a load of data.
Yeah.
So we then understand, okay, so how is our vehicle being used when it's 15 years old versus when it's 1 year old?
Yeah.
And we know that generally for a Range Rover to go off-road properly, it's the third or fourth owner who will take it off-road, because of course they don't have the real fear of having it scratched.
Yeah.
So our cars do get used, and the capabilities that we build in get used, but it doesn't get used by the first owner, because of course for them it's their pride and joy. It needs it. Yeah, they've spent a lot of money. You don't want to damage it.
Yeah.
Fourth user wants to go off-road with it, and of course, how many 4x4 tracks do you see today with Discovery 1s, 2s, and a load of Defenders racing around it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they've all been personalised. They've all got lots of new body parts. They've been maintained reasonably well for the purpose of what those people want to use it for, which is to go off-road and have some fun at the weekend. Which is a pretty amazing story, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you could just see that happening on a mass scale. And I think that that bit of thinking about the kind of upscaling and the talking about adding on features and over the air type updates or switching on of features, but there's also the physical features. If you've got a vehicle that's come back on subscription and the next user wants to use it in a more off-road task because it's moving into a different category because it's 3, 5 years old, 7 years old, then it could have parts changed on it. Particularly with BEVs, they're going to be hugely modular. Like you said, many less. It's a battery with some motors attached to it, but I mean, ultimately you can change any of those things, including the battery. The battery's the most expensive bit, but you could upgrade the motors if you were going to drive it off road. You could easily change the wheels and tires, because the current wheels, if they're fine, can go on another car. So you kind of have this talk about it a lot, of the kind of triggers broom, the only fools and horses triggers broom, but it's the same car 25 years later, but it's it's got none of its original parts
Yes.
because the parts have
Well,
changed
and of
moved
course,
over time.
technology moves so fast. So, of course, if you look at some of the Chinese product, and they've got massive flat screens that come out of the roof space to supply the rear seat passengers with effectively a 20-inch, 25-inch almost cinematography experience.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing because, of course, 5 years ago, who would have thought about it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We kind of were plugging in a little screen and putting it on the back
one
of
of
the
your
headrest.
Netflix user things is always on in the back of your car. You want to be
Yes,
able to watch
and
Netflix.
of course, and I think if you were to be able to upgrade the screens and the technology, and also go with some of the fashions, do we have buttons? Do we not have buttons? Well, actually, well, we can have both if we've got a relatively modular center console where we can replace a screen when it ages.
Yeah.
We can put some buttons in if that's what the client wants.
I definitely saw one of the Chinese car brands. I don't think it was on a model in the UK, but maybe one that was being sold in China, but where that central screen had the ability to add buttons.
Yeah.
So it was effectively like a clip in, and it would kind of connect almost like wirelessly.
Yeah.
Connect in, and you could have buttons or not have buttons. You could change the size of the screen, and I definitely think there's a market. I keep talking about it I've talked about it on a few podcasts this series, and I'm sure someone's going to nick my idea before I get around to it. But the idea of having almost like an upcycling workshop for second-hand BEVs, where you would be buying BEVs that are 4 or 5 years old, getting them in and going, right, as long as we know the battery has not been wrecked, you buy it based on basically the battery, and then you upgrade it for different customers, effectively personalize it in a world where you can 3D print parts, where you can put screens anywhere you want. It's not a difficult thing to do technologically, but you could take a 5-year-old Tesla or an I-Pace and basically make it as good as a new one in its own way. You know?
And of course, we've got one of our fellow OEMs, so Renault, of course, have got a factory already up and running in order to fully refurbish cars that they want to then put out as, I guess, at a price premium. Because they've almost improved them beyond the point of when they were first manufactured. We have a small enterprise, and this is why Pivotal, of course, can talk about having fresh cars, because we've refurbished those cars ourselves at Castle Bromwich. And those cars, of course, they get the latest software. They get some of the niggles fixed, and actually it potentially is better than when it came out of the factory. Which is quite interesting, really. And then if you think about, say, the Defender community, how many people love their Defender, would love an old Defender. I think looking at and the sales of the new one, there's a whole host of new people who love the Defender vehicle and love the looks. Well, actually, how does that car go from what currently is, I think it's on the market for 6 years, and how does that go from what it is now to effectively mirror what the original Defender does for a lot of people? Which is their off-road vehicle for choice. It's the car that most farmers drive on a weekday. It's the car that enthusiasts want to buy and maintain. So it'll be interesting to see how that transition happens, and also how can we play a role as an OEM. And how can we create that community around that vehicle?
A community for parts. Community. We've talked before about the 3D printing of share community of 3D printed parts and of aftermarket parts and all that kind of stuff is definitely a thing. And I think the idea, particularly with the software playing such a key role, and particularly in BEVs, the idea of a car being better when you sell it than it was when you bought it is a really interesting one. I had a guy I was chatting to who worked for Vallejo, who do a lot of the software, and he said, now that's the big change in the automotive industry that at least they see, is that now a car is its worst the day you pick it up because it constantly gets better. And I've definitely seen that in my own vehicle, that the features that it has now, every time there's a thing where I think, I wish there was a button for that, the next software update there is. It happens because it gets easy to do that kind of thing. And it would be the same with parts and physical elements as well.
It will, and as I say, people are investing a lot in their vehicles for a long period of time. Once, especially those who love vehicles and love cars, and what we would love to do is, of course, to be able to create that community, to share that with everybody. And also, why wouldn't we therefore use brand partnerships in that space? Again, it's all to enhance the vehicle and the use of the vehicle throughout and keep it desirable for much longer. And ultimately, and of course, our retailers are always a little bit concerned when OEMs have grand ideas about owning the vehicle for the life cycle, but actually, they're currently the face of the client. Really, they're closest to our clients. They're located throughout the country, so actually, they are ideally placed to pick up some of this and actually to run with it. As we said earlier in the conversation, battery electric vehicles will likely last longer, will likely require less service. The service won't take as long, so therefore you sort of need to service more cars to keep the same amount of revenue, I would expect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So therefore, we all need to therefore look at how do we diversify together? How do we continue to partner in that way that we deliver something to our clients that they love?
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting to see how that kind of plays within the ecosystem. So today, what happens? How long can you keep it within sort of the OEM ecosystem with the dealers? But then eventually it leaves the ecosystem, and then everyone loses contact. And in the world that we've been describing, it could have the potential that the vehicle if the ecosystem is more open, it could still stay, on the balance sheet of the OEM or captive, operated and managed by a dealer partner or a set of dealer partners, retail partners. And then if you have a wider ecosystem, if you're prepared to open up, it could actually mean that you never lose the customer because the vehicle stays.
So hopefully you never lose the customer. And the client needs to be key, and of course the client can go from one service to another service, and hopefully at some point as he grows wealthier, or even if he stays in the same type of vehicle for his life, hopefully he'll continue to want to use the service that we provide. We also therefore then manage the vehicle throughout its life cycle, because we feel as an ecosystem of partners that we can deliver a service to our clients that they want, and then we can get the value out of it at the back end. So we can reuse the battery, we can recycle the materials, all of the aluminium can be recycled and actually can build the next vehicle. So really, if we look at a couple of things in that we're exploring and continue to explore with our partners is of course, what would it take to manage a vehicle cradle to cradle? How do we have a first life cycle as a vehicle and then a second life cycle as a battery? And of course, how can we then create that circularity by design? Because of course, if we know that the vehicle has multiple use phases, then of course, why don't we design it to inherently be capable of enabling multiple use phases? And I guess if we and within our strategy team, we kind of, and the wider enterprise strategy team, we look at 3 horizons. And of course, if you look at Horizon 3, if you look at autonomous, people say, oh, will it ever come? Well, we kind of know it's already there. It just means that the cars aren't particularly attractive with the current technology. But once it's here, maybe give it another 20 years, we might be long retired by then. Or at least, hopefully. But at that point, it is just a service, and you are just subscribing to a service, because there is no need to drive that. There is no need to have it on your driveway. But again, at that point, you might still want a different vehicle at different points in time. You might not want to pay the same price for a car during the week when you're just going to the station versus when you're going to a restaurant in the evening. Absolutely. Because you would like to be delivered to a restaurant in a nice Range Rover, and during the week you'll just take an Evoque.
Exactly. I think it's definitely that will be the bit that people will transition into, that choosing different levels of service, and kind of moving through, particularly into the autonomous world. And I think we're just running close to time, and I'm conscious that you and I could talk about this stuff for ages. I actually say that in every podcast, but I do genuinely mean it. So it's really interesting topics we can dive into. So thank you very much for coming on. We really appreciate your time, and you're super busy. So thanks to Tomorrow's Journey and Asset Finance Connect for supporting the podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If there's any other episodes that you guys want to follow, to listen, subscribe to our page. We're across Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast, and the YouTube channel, also across various websites and other things. So look forward to seeing you all next time.